Hi, everyone, and welcome back to People Do Want to Know podcast. My guest today is an iconic, eclectic, and very grounded artist, Marc Dennis. Marc Dennis is known for his hyper-realistic paintings where he finds new meanings in old masters and explores contemporary questions of culture, humor, and identity. His inspiration comes from personal experiences, ranging from accidentally starting a forest fire at age 7 to his days camping in the Puerto Rican forest as a middle schooler. His art is also sometimes inspired by his troubled teen years, which include multiple arrests, knife fights, several gun-related incidents, a night in jail, his day in court, and his highly influential post-college days living in a teepee on a Native American reservation. All of this you will hear about in the episode. Marc is also incredibly well-traveled. He's lived in Israel, Rome, Venice, Florence, and Egypt, as well as spent extensive time in the mountains of Peru. He considers himself a Juban, a Jewish Cuban, and is a very acclaimed and respected member of the art community, both as an artist and as an educator. What I'll add is that despite his turbulent upbringing, Marc has done an extraordinary amount for the Jewish community, and he is also a highly devoted dad. He's turned himself around, but he's retained still this kind of fun and edgy side. If you ever see Marc anywhere, he will most likely be wearing his signature black and white Puma tracksuit. After we recorded together, we split a potato knish. He's an easygoing, well-rounded mensch, and I'm so honored to know him. Hello, Marc. Welcome to People Do Want to Know podcast.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
In your iconic tracksuit.
I'm told I have to wear it forever now. People notice me in art fairs. They notice me on the street. So, it's sort of a blessing and a curse.
Well, it's a signature look.
I guess so. I should be paid by Puma.
Sponsored by Puma. Okay, please tell us about yourself. What do you do and how did you get there?
Well, I'm an artist, professor, college professor. I was tenured. I left the post at the time to come back to the city. I was teaching upstate. So I now am sort of an independent instructor. But I'm a full-time painter, a full-time single divorced dad of 2 teenagers, which is a very big part of my life. And I'm represented with a gallery here in New York City called Harper's, and I'm represented in Los Angeles with a gallery called Anat Ebgi Gallery. I'm also a Holocaust researcher / scholar. I take that kind of lightly because it's not full-time, but I taught Holocaust studies as well. So I take great pride in that as part of my identity.
Tell me a little bit about your Jewish upbringing. You have teenage kids, but you yourself as a teenager were a big rebel. So I'm curious to know how that kind of unfolded. What was your Jewish upbringing like?
Well, I love this topic because it feeds into everything that I kind of stand for today. It's odd. So let me just say that as a kid, like maybe 6 or 7, I drew all the time, all day long, all night long. My parents were quite happy that they knew where to always find me, sitting in front of the TV, drawing, or looking at a book, drawing, or being out in the backyard, drawing birds, whatever it might be. But I never really wanted to be an artist. I always thought it was just this hobby that came to me naturally. I really enjoyed it. I found some great solace in it. I was also a very active, restless kid, one of 5 boys in a relatively Jewish secular household. However, my dad grew up in Cuba. He was born in Cuba because my Zadie and Bubby, Yaakov and Gussie Detenko, came from a very small shtetl outside Kyiv, came to America, and were denied entry. They were told at the time, and this is a quote that my Zadie told me before he passed a long time ago. He said, "We were told either to go back or to go to Cuba, where the rest of the Jews are going." Who knew? I don't know. He didn't know. He didn't speak any English. He spoke Russian, Ukrainian, and Yiddish. So he went to Cuba, and that's where he raised a family of 4. My dad was one of them. So my dad, in this old Jewish section of Havana, was studying in yeshiva. He was relatively Orthodox. You ever see Fiddler on the Roof?
Yeah, of course.
Well, that's my Zadie and my Bubby. They were like, they were relatively Orthodox, coming from a very small shtetl, and made it work. And then they decided, let's get out of here because, Castro's taken over, and that was a circus. So they came to Boston because they learned that they had a cousin, and a cousin would sponsor them. You had to be sponsored. And the cousin's last name was D-A-N-I-S, Dennis. And they learned it through a lot of struggles and challenges trying to find out if they could come to America through a sponsor. And they discovered that there was a sponsor outside of Boston, a distant cousin that they never met. They didn't even meet them when they finally got to Boston. But when they finally got to Boston, it was a guy who did their paperwork. And he said, you got to change your name from Detenko. You got to give it something else. Like your sponsor here even has a weird name. Maybe you should find a balance. Like, it's a nice Irish city. This is what I was told. And he said, okay, what should we do? And he said, Dennis, that's a good name for you. And that was it. And my Zadie said, okay, we're Americans, thank you. We're now Dennis's. So because my dad was relatively Orthodox growing up, in very short time he met my mom, who was from Roxbury, born in Somerville, but grew up in Roxbury. My dad, his family moved to Dorchester on Blue Hill Avenue, and we were all born in Boston, me and my brothers. And he met this woman who was a secular Jew, Arlene Joy Solomon. So they got married. They have 5 boys. And we were raised in a way that was rather, mostly it leaned secular, but we did all the high holidays. I think it was very difficult for him to manage. There's a term, I never really knew what it meant, herding cats, but maybe it's good now, because to have Shabbat with 5 of us, 5 teenage boys, a year apart, dating, sports, it was really challenging. Friday nights were big nights for football and whatnot. So I think he gave that up, and my dad ultimately just became a secular Jew as well. I, however, and this loops us back to when I was drawing as a kid, became fascinated with my ancestry. Like, my Zadie and Bubby passed away. My Nana and Poppy on my mom's side were Polish, Hungarian. Maybe there's Lithuanian in there. I wasn't sure. Like, no one really knew about the family. And then I learned I had cousins living in Jerusalem and Mea Sherim, which means they're ultra-Orthodox. And I'm like, what? I have that? I have cousins? I don't know. I mean, and my mother said, yeah, Marc, she's from Boston. So Marc, you got cousins everywhere. You want to meet them, reach out. I don't know how to, I don't know what to tell you. It's really hard, But then I began to reach out, and I did my research. And in 2001, I learned that I could go to Israel and maybe look for my cousins in Mea Sherim. They're like, maybe, I don't know. I wanted to try at least some point. And at that time, I was engaged in dialogue with my secular cousin who lived in Jerusalem. But he wasn't ultra-Orthodox. He was, like I said, secular. And we started chatting, and he said, oh, yeah, not only that, but we have associations directly to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And I'm like, wait, what? And he says, yeah, cousins from the Klein family were all on paperwork, had been murdered at Birkenau. And, most people don't know that Auschwitz is a massive camp of 3 camps. There's Auschwitz I, there's Auschwitz II, which was otherwise Birkenau. And then they had Monowitz, which was a work camp, part of all the larger concentration camp unit. And I said, tell me more. So he gave me a list of the names. He had a copy of the paperwork. Somehow you could find it. Yad Vashem had paperwork. The Auschwitz Memorial in Auschwitzim, Poland had it. I think that's how you pronounce it, Auschwitzim. So, the Germans change names all the time. Yeah. So I had learned that on my mother's side of the family, we lost 24 people at Birkenau, murdered. And then we had 7 distant cousins, also on the Klein family, who froze to death in the woods as partisan fighters. And this really empowered me to do more research. So based upon my research, by the way, I did get to Israel several times, and I never met my cousins. They were unreachable. I mean, Mea Sherim is really hard to penetrate, and no one really knew who I was, and. Mm-hmm. So Mea Sherim, I don't know if that was filmed in Mea Sherim. I have to look into it. But it's like that. It's a community like that, really. So imagine like Williamsburg, stacked high up. And if you see the movie Ushpizin, I think it's filmed relatively close, which is a fascinating movie, by the way. Okay, so because I was interested in art and I did my research on the Holocaust, I went to Yad Vashem. This is how it all started for me. All my studies on the Shoah started on this day, 2005. I walk into Yad Vashem, and on the wall was a small drawing of the moon, black and white sort of ink study, it looked interesting. And then it read Peter, P-I-T-E-R, like a Czech spelling, Peter Gins, Terezin, or Theresienstadt, as the Germans called it, the so-called paradise ghetto that Hitler had named, so that when the International Red Cross came to Prague, they would see that the Jews were being treated fairly, but it was all a sham. There's a soccer field and whatnot. But this was like a stopping point to go on to other concentration camps, mostly Auschwitz. So, and this was in Prague. So the little drawing on the wall said, that it's seen Peter Gins, age 15, and then it had like a date, which I probably didn't pay much attention to because I walked immediately up to the person who was manning, well, it's a woman, so I don't know, it was the person that behind the front desk, and I said, could you please explain to me why you would have a teenager do a rendering of a moon saying it's like moon over Auschwitz? I mean, isn't that odd? Like, was this an assignment? Or she goes, no, that's an actual drawing that someone made who was that had seen the concentration camp, or the otherwise referred to as a prison. And I said, wait, what? They made art in the concentration camps? And she said, well, yeah, I mean, it's actually a very popular subject amongst certain scholars, but it's really not been studied thoroughly, except by two people, and we have some of the artwork here in the building. And I said, well, I would give anything. At the time, I had just accepted a teaching position, full-time tenured professor position at a small liberal arts college in upstate New York. And I was on break now, and I thought, wow, I could bring back some of this information. I could share it. This is really important for me because being a professor, academia really mattered. I was more of a professor at the time than a full-time painter. I mean, I was painting, but being a professor, I took great pride in that, and I wanted to gather as much information as possible to share it in that context. And, well, may I see the drawings? I mean, am I allowed to? I mean, she goes, well, who are you? I said, well, I'm a professor of painting and drawing up at a small school in upstate New York in America, and I'm a Jew, and it turns out that I have cousins who perished in Birkenau, and I would like to learn more about this. And being an artist, I think this would be incredible information for a lot of reasons. And she said, absolutely, let's go. I was like, wait, what? That easy? She goes, yeah, I'm going to introduce you to the curator. And so we went upstairs, and I have a really cool photo because the curator said, you got to prove to people that you were here. They're not going to believe you. And, I had a camera, 2005. So I went up with white gloves and I handled artwork, and I noticed that they were made in various concentration camps. I mean, I'm thinking, wait, what? These are made in the camp? I mean, not just in Terezin, which I learned later had an art program specifically so that the children imprisoned could make art to impress the International Red Cross, to appease the world. Like this is like 1939 to 40 before, it really hit the fan after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and we got involved, and it became a massive deportation of Jews throughout Eastern Europe. And I said to her, well, why would they make art? How did they make art? Like, where did they get the supplies? Like, what? And that's what led me. I'm very proud of this. It's essentially a book, but it's a syllabus that I wrote that I brought back to the dean and the president of the small school that I was teaching, and I had requested that they review it and maybe include it in a historical component for whoever teaches world history. And they said, well, this is a lot of art in here. Why don't you teach it? I said, well, I don't have a master's in art history. I mean, but the faculty like me. There's a lot of politics in academia, but the faculty read it, and they were blown away by it. And they said, let's teach this. You can teach it. So I taught this course called Under the Floorboards, Hidden Art of the Holocaust, because I had learned that mostly the artists that were imprisoned, which was the other question I asked myself, if I were imprisoned as a Jew and as an artist, I think I'm pretty skilled. And the Nazis loved academic art. They loved people who were skilled. They loved representational art, realism. So they would have loved my skill set. They would have hated me, but they would have forced me to make paintings of visiting dignitaries or portraits of Hitler, Goering, Himmler, and put them in the houses of the concentration camp officers and the people who oversaw the camp structure. So I had put together this incredible syllabus, and I taught it for 14 years, and it became an obsession, and it just grew, and it got larger, and then I began to meet survivors. And then I thought about the fact that these survivors would not be around fast forward 10 years, which is kind of where we are today, and they're not around. Very few. So I joined forces with a friend of mine from Tel Aviv, who's a filmmaker, and we interviewed one particular survivor named Dina Jacobson for, I believe it was 7-8 hours, her entire story, taking breaks. She was old. Her husband had just passed, but I had met them upstate, and I had become like best friends with them. So this was before I was married with kids, so we're talking like 2005 to 2015. I had Shabbat with them. I would go over just to have cookies and milk with Dina because she would call me and say, you have to eat today and come over, I have cookies. And I'm like, okay, well, I have class in like an hour. She goes, well, she lived down the street from the school. And we got to become best friends. And she would tell me her story. And I said, Dina, before, I want to record this. I want you to, she goes, whatever you want to do, I'll work with you. I'll do this with you. And she sat like we are now, right in front of me. I had a camera on my head so that there was no, like she would be looking, people look at the camera like you just said to me earlier. And so it's me in front of her, and it's her looking directly at me. And the idea of this film is for the survivor to tell their story. So it's Dina telling her story. There are other survivors, but there's so much work in editing and things of that nature that I'm focusing on Dina Jacobson's testimony, and she's looking directly out at the viewer. So it's like just her head speaking to whomever will take the time to watch it. It's in the editing phase. It's a lot of work. And this has been going on for years. So.
I was going to say, that's like 20 years at this point that this has been in the works then.
Right, so that's when so I got married, had kids, and I don't know what else to say, but unless somebody understands what it means to be a parent, devoted, dedicated. I mean, you could be a parent, but I took great pride in that more than anything in my life, and that was mine.
As you were speaking, I have this thought that, you're telling me the story of an academic and a professor and this artsy mensch who has dedicated his career to the community, but there's another dimension of you that's kind of a troublemaker and someone who pushes boundaries and does unconventional things. As you were speaking, I was curious, you mentioned to me that you lived on a Native American reservation. When was that in the timeline?
So let me loop back.
And why did you even do it?
I kind of sidestepped it. So I was drawing all the time as a kid, and I loved it, and I found great solace. And I did say that I didn't want to be an artist. I wanted to be, I don't know, a zoologist, a veterinarian. I had a lot of different thoughts. Mostly had to do with animals of all kinds. People think animals we're animals. Spiders are animals. So fast forward to high school, even before high school, 14, I was, 8th grade. I started stealing things. I was pretty good at it. I don't know where to go with this. I would walk into a store like Walmart and just, clip a lock on a bike and walk out with it.
Why did you want to steal stuff
I don't
at
know.
the time?
I don't know. I've been asked that question a lot, mostly by the cops when they got me. Because I did get caught, which changed my life, which is why I'm an artist, oddly enough. But I don't know. It was a challenge. I was restless. I was a good kid. I did well in school. I never flunked the class. Well, art one year, but that's another story. So I just didn't go to class. But anyway, I'm in high school now, and I'm 15. I'm a sophomore. And I went on a tear. I robbed, I stole, I broke into homes, I broke into businesses. I never went into a bedroom to take personal things. But, I stole things out of people's garages mostly because I had run into a group of, oddly, bikers in the area. I can't really say much about this, but they always said to me, if you can get me a, Makita drill set, I'll give you $100 or $50 or whatever. And, I was 15. It was great.
And this was in Massachusetts.
Yeah, so in and around the suburbs. I mean, I have a lot of stories. I mean, so many stories that got me into trouble. But ultimately, it comes down to the fact that I did get busted. I got arrested, cuffed, taken to jail. And then, naturally, I was released. But I had a court date. And in court, again, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was told prior, as I entered the courtroom, I was told prior by the judge who met me independently. She said, I'm going to give you 20 minutes to explain yourself, to a jury of your parents' peers, like they were all adults, people's homes apparently who I violated, cars I stole, and people who own those, whatever. I was so scared, but I thought, I got to get a second chance. I got something, something good has to come out of this because that's just the way I thought. And I went off 20 minutes when the judge said, you have 20 minutes to talk. We're all going to listen. It's just you. Even if you pause, it's still your time. We're not going to interrupt until 20 minutes are up. Everybody here knows that. I understand being 15 and a half, you could be a little nervous, but take your time. My God, nonstop. I talked nonstop, no breaks. I don't even think I breathed about how I love art, of how I love comic books mainly, of how my goal in life, once I graduate high school, is to put, these are my words, because I had this weird patriotic bent where I said that I wanted to be one of those people who could bring the old traditional American comic book back to the forefront so that anime would take a back seat.
You've literally done that now, which is the crazy part. Okay.
Oh, well, you're really wonderful for saying that. But so they're listening. I'm nonstop. And then she leans forward and she has 2 letters in her hands. She goes, I'm going to read these letters out loud. And I was like, what? You got letters? Who? I didn't write I don't know who wrote a letter. Like, what is this who wrote the letters? I didn't know. My head was all over the place. And she said, one of your letters is from your teacher. It appears that you were on the yearbook committee. And that's a little funky. I mean, I was too cool of a kid to let people know that. But so I looked at her like, really, you know that? I mean, because I was like a hard ass, and I had long hair, I wore a t-shirt, I had a collar shirt in court, but I was like that tough kid, and I didn't want people to know that. And I was like, well, is this relevant? And she says, yeah, well, I'm gonna have to read this letter, Mr. Dennis, so please, let me read this. And apparently the teacher who ran the yearbook club and the yearbook committee was also my English teacher. And, I didn't really know that at the time. I mean, I knew that, but I didn't know that teachers took on clubs. I only did it because they asked me to be on it. And I liked one of the girls on the club because I could draw. And they're like, dude, can you draw caricatures of teachers for the yearbook? Can you draw cartoons and football players and, whatever? I was like, yeah, I would love to do that. You're going to put it in print? So that was my motivation rather. And so she reads the letter, and the letter states that Marc Dennis is a very talented kid. He's a little restless, a little problematic, some other words, but he's a really good kid. And give him a second chance, in other words. And then the other letter was from the vice principal of the school, who had said, Mark is a good kid, he's very well liked, no doubt, he's a handful. But it was very touching. He had said that I think the kid's gonna go places. That's simple. And she said, I'll make a decision. And I didn't know anything till the next morning, but they gave me my second chance.
Do you think your parents had a role that they played in that, or it was all the school? Because I imagine your Jewish parents must have had a heart attack at that rate.
Yeah, they were pissed.
Yeah?
Yeah, I remember it. It's vivid. It's right here. I remember every second when my dad came to pick me up at the jail. He waited, rightly so. He waited, and then, he was pissed. I still don't know really why I did what I did, but I was always getting into trouble. I mean, in second grade, I lit the woods on fire and started a forest fire. So, that was a real big mess at the time, and everybody thought, oh, this kid. I was Dennis the Menace. I was the Dennis the Menace in real life.
Once you kind of had your second chance, what brought you to the Native American reservation?
So, like I said, I had really long hair, but I was very intrigued by Plains tribes culture, specifically Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho. I was really curious about the American West, and I was more curious about the way that many of the tribes defeated the cavalry post-Civil War, like Custer. I really wanted to know what happened. I was really interested in their culture in the sense that it was important to me to understand because it was what the history of this country was prior to the arrival of the Europeans. So I did a lot of research and I began to study the language, Lakota language, which is otherwise referred to as the Western Sioux Indians. And I began to learn the language. I thought it was really intriguing. I began to wear war shirts. I had shirts made out of deerskin, like I was that kid in high school. See, I'm telling you, I went to the prom. I got stories. And I had long hair, like as long as yours, if not a little bit longer, dark. I couldn't grow any facial hairs, and people thought I was like this half-breed, like I was either Apache, who I also studied the different Apache tribes because Geronimo really interested me, but that wasn't his Apache name. So I wanted to learn about Crazy Horse, Tashunka I wanted to learn about Sitting Bull, I wanted to learn all about their culture, all about their wars. So one thing led to another, and then I went out west much later after high school. And while I was out west, I ran into a full-blooded Lakota Indian at a restaurant, and he came over to me because he heard me say, Hokahe Washtelo. I was talking to some other guy, and he's like, do you speak my language? And I said, are you a Lakota? He said, yeah. He says, my name is Daryl, and we started talking. And then he said, I want to invite you to the res, which was, to me, an incredible opportunity. Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in
what state?
South Dakota. So, and it butts up against another Indian reservation called Rosebud, which is where he was born, but his relatives and his sister now lived on Pine Ridge, which was a bigger reservation for like where, Crazy Horse lived, and Red Cloud, Akpia Luta, where you could see the Wounded Knee Memorial. So I went and I stayed with his sister, Darlene Wounded Shield, that's her name, but she also goes by Ibis Milk. They have two names. A lot of the Lakota Indians I met and befriended had two names. It was an incredible experience. And then they said, you have to meet our holy man, Richard Moves Camp, that was his name, on the res. The res is pretty big. I mean, compared to the entire state of South Dakota, and the surrounding region, it's very small for what they knew. Like, they no longer were nomadic, buffalo hunters, but they were now on a res, since like 1889, 1890. And he said to me, you can live in my teepee on the edge of a creek, but you gotta, it's a ride. He had a big property. He had a lot of property, and it was like an hour ride across his property because he was a very popular guy. I think he's still alive, actually. So I said, okay, cool. So I learned really how to utilize a teepee, which I did not know. I was unfamiliar how the flaps work and how you get a fire in the center going and how it stays so warm, because I was wicked nervous because it snowed that night. And this was April 9th, and it snowed. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to live in a teepee during my first time, and it's going to snow. But I had to learn how to control the flaps. It was incredible, actually. So, I spent some time out there, a couple of months, and came back east. And that was late 90s. And then I took a teaching job upstate. And so my life is comprised of all these, pocketed interests that are being fed all the time. I'm still very much interested in Plains tribe history, obviously the Holocaust, and painting. I mean, now I'm a full-time artist. I left my teaching post.
And your art, it kind of spans a couple of different things from what I saw last. All of it feels kind of like hyper-realistic, but cartoonish in a sense. And it has this depth where you feel like you're immersed into whatever you're looking at. So if there's a bunny with a bubble, the bunny's like right there in front of you, in your face. And then at the same time, you have the Jewish art that you make, and you have a self-portrait, right, that you've made where you're dressed like an Orthodox man. What kind of inspires these completely different pieces, or how are you thinking about what you want to create?
That's a really good question. As an artist, I really do it to make sense of the world I live in. I don't know if it's anybody else's world, but we share a world, and we also, we all have our own imaginations, and so I combine the two. So I take what I understand as the real world, the real and physical world, and then I sort of allow it to merge with my imaginary world. So I'm kind of creating an alternate reality in my work, and I always thought that if that's the case, how are people going to know it's me? Like, how are they going to know it's my work? Because my style is not that unique. I am a hyper-realist. That's a term which someone applied to the nature of someone who paints very realistically, but not directly from a photograph. Maybe using photographs as reference, but they don't copy a photograph, which is what the photorealists did. They work directly from the photo. I violate the photo. I have many, many photos I work from. Photos being a screen, whatever the case. So I thought, well, I'm going to incorporate, things about me, my identity, my sense of humor, the fact that I grew up in comic books. So I apply it all, and it's been really successful. So for some reason, it's working.
It resonates with people.
And it's
so delightful, and it has just like a lightheartedness about it that I think really draws people in.
Yeah, thank you. Look, we all know that there's an incredible sense of division amongst probably every country. Is sort of at an imaginary civil war in their minds. Everybody takes sides. I try to see both sides and, nurture myself and make sure that I'm taking care of my kids in the way that I need to as their dad. But as an artist, I don't care what people want. I think about what is going to inspire and motivate me to spend 12 to 18 hours alone in the studio. And believe me, you said earlier that I was a mensch. I love people. Well, it's really hard being alone in the studio for that long. So if I'm going to be in the studio for that long, I better damn well have the proper inspiration. Like I can't think about what other people expect of me. So I go in there and I just kind of think about my past, my childhood, the memories. And the thing that happens most is that I always want people to feel comfortable. Like I care. Like that's the mensch part. Like you had mentioned, when you get up close to you feel immersed. And it's like I'm painting blankets for people's minds or their souls. Like I'm giving them something to wrap their head around. Like I don't make it difficult. I don't want it to be too conceptual. I don't want it to be too disorienting. I want you to say, oh, you know what? I know what I'm looking at, but my God, the presentation's bizarre. Who is this person?
Well, I think that's also the part of the magic, because it's so obvious. You're like, well, is that what I'm looking at? What am I supposed to be looking at? And then you're kind of going through that stream of consciousness when you look at your art.
Yeah, so when I was teaching, I always told the students, I said, listen, you're going to have your ideas, you're going to have your intentions, you're going to have your inspirations. The 3I component of making art. Ideas, intentions, and inspiration. And there's the 3E part. You do it through experimentation, exploration, and do all of it with enthusiasm. So for me, I just, it's because I teach that because I live it. I want people to take away whatever it is that they are able or not. I mean, because I have no control once the piece is done, how people might respond or how they might react or how it might reverberate with them later. And I've learned that being an artist, I'm always taking a chance because it's all I do. It's all I do is I make art. And thank God there are people out there who want to live with it. And believe me, I go to bed every night. First things I think about are my kids. Second is like, damn, somebody up there likes me.
That's true. That is actually a fact. Art, we talk about this a lot on the show, that art is a self-development process. And that's all it is. And a lot of art is not even, it's kind of like you're just the vessel for conveying something that's provided to you outside of, what you believe or how you want to be received. True artists are just a vessel for a greater message. And throughout all these life experiences, what wisdom do you think you want to pass on to your kids? Because I can see that, like, this chapter of your life that you're in, now you're a very invested father. And that's kind of the project that you're diving deeply on. So what is it that you want to share with them?
Yeah, they're 15 and 17. I always impress upon them to be true to themselves. You got to let kids go. You got to let them figure shit out. I had no guidance. Obviously, I screwed up a lot. But now that, I'm on my feet, so to speak, I want to just be true to themselves, to listen to the world, figure it out. Like, don't, everything in moderation. There's going to be extremists. There's going to be people who don't care. There's going to be people who care too much. You got to take it all in stride and just figure it out.
What about your message to Jewish people? What would it be?
Well, I don't understand the question. You mean be true to yourself. I think there are people who question themselves, and I think if you could take a breather and stop questioning yourself, if you're a Jew, and live your life.
I ask because you and I originally met at a dinner with a bunch of kind of content creators and Jewish activists. And a lot of the people in that room are very outspoken, and there's almost an element of like aggression around this is what we ought to believe as a Jewish people. Whereas your art, although it is very clearly Jewish, it doesn't really force any which way what the viewer should believe, which is a sign of good art. But I wonder how you make sense of that, because you're involved in the community, and I want to know what you want the Jewish people to do.
Oh, wow. That's heavy. I love that Shabbat. I wish they did more of that. Those Shabbat dinners are great. I had a lot of fun, and I appreciate having been invited. And you're right. There are a lot of people who are in attendance. They have a different perspective on things. So, like going back to advice that my Nana gave me, my mom's mom, whose relatives perished in Birkenau, although she was born in America. She would always say to me, Mark, seek balance. Because I was a crazy kid, 5 boys.
Seek balance.
Yeah, seek balance. Like, you don't always have to eat fast. You don't always have to rush. You don't always have to, I don't know what she was. I mean, it was 9. I don't know. I didn't care about balance. I just,
But you remembered.
Yeah, because I tell my kids now, everything in moderation. Just seek, be true to yourself. Everything in moderation. Seek balance. Don't get trapped in conversations you don't want to be part of. Excuse yourself or go for it. If you're that person who loves to debate and you're prepared, go for it. I said, the better informed you are, the more prepared you're going to be for a debate. Whether it's healthy or unhealthy, you're going to be able to hold your ground. And nowadays, with this whole, the horrifying events that occurred on October 7th that pushed everyone to the brink of figuring out what to do next. I can't tell someone not to be extreme, and I can't tell someone, who's all chill about it, to become more active. Those days are over. I'm not that person. I'm focused on, I have, put it this way, I have a lot of energy, but I know where to put it. I can't be there for everyone all the time anymore, because I used to try to be. But I am certainly a very, I am involved. I don't know what that ultimately means to a person listening to this, but I am part of the community in the sense that I am in attendance to these lectures and discussion groups and Zoom calls that people talk about problem solving. And I don't know if I have the answers. I come from a family of 5 boys. I mean, I fucking punched this kid right in the face in 7th grade who called me a kike. Can I curse? Sorry. This kid called me a kike. I didn't even know what kike was. No one had called me a kike up to that point in my life. But I'm thinking, wait, what? How does he even know I'm a Jew? Because I knew it had to mean something bad, because I had just moved to this new town in Newtonville, Massachusetts, and this kid, Tony D'Angelo, walked up to me and he says, "Hey, kike, you're in my seat." I'm like, what? Second day of classes. I just moved there. I was the new kid. But apparently people knew who I was. I don't know why. I don't know how that happened. Word spreads a lot in 7th grade. It was like a forest fire. But I got up and I beat the crap out of this kid, and it turned out to be the toughest kid in the grade, besides one other kid, Kevin Jones, this black dude, who came up to me at lunch that day. It was like parting of the sea. He comes walking up towards me in the lunchroom. And he said, I heard you kicked D'Angelo's ass today. I'm like, whoa, I don't know if I punched him in the face a couple. He goes, yeah, man, that's cool. I hate that kid. So I got your back from now on. And he walked away. So the toughest kid in the school embraced me because we both felt a kinship. And it was the first time in my life where I realized, I now have this identity in the eyes of others. I was just a Jew growing up at that point. I went to temple and we did high holidays, I had other Jewish friends, but I had mostly non-Jewish friends. No one brought it up till it came up, here in 7th grade. And from that point forward, I thought, I'm proud. I know who I am. I'm giving back to the community, not just the Jewish community, but, the global community. I think what matters most is not to always wake up angry. It was a big concern of mine when I was younger. I wasn't just restless. I was ready to fight. I was angry. I was just this kid, and this teenager and this college kid. And I got into a lot of fights. But one thing I heard most of my life was, funny, you don't look Jewish. And I kept thinking, my God, this whole Jewish thing is what the... And then when I did the research towards the Holocaust course, and this is, I'm a man. I'm reading about the protocols of the Elders of Zion, how it started in Russia and how the Nazis had adopted it. And then I thought, why were they so... And then I did all this research on the history of being a Jew, of Judaism, or the way that we were viewed in the eyes of others. And I was really disturbed by it, and I remain so. But I do it so that if I'm going to bring light to the fact that I am a Jew, I'm going to imbue it with my sense of humor, because I also think I'm pretty funny.
It's true.
And so I started this body of work called 3 Jews Walk Into a Bar. And it's the bar that they're walking into is metaphorical because they're standing in front of a very famous painting by Edouard Manet called The Folies Bergère. And it's a woman's barmaid staring out. And it's, there's a joke, you could pick it. Anyone could walk into a bar. Like you could pick a rabbi, a priest, and a Buddhist to walk into a bar, But I thought, fuck it, I'm a Jew. If I'm going to paint about my identity and the fact that we're funny, I think for the most part, because if you look at comic history, not just comic book history, but comical actual humor history, they're all Jews behind the funny stuff. People don't know that comic books were started as sort of like Batman, in particular Captain America, to fight Nazis. Captain America was only designed to fight the Nazis. I don't think people even know this, but the comic book industry, something I grew up on, I didn't know at the time. So I began to think, you know what, if I'm going to fight the fight, the good fight, I got to do it in the ways that only I can do it. There's a lot of people out there that can fight the good fight in the ways that they're able because of not just their skill sets, but the positions in which they are in. I'm an artist, so I make paintings, and the paintings, I think they're pretty funny, actually. And people love them. In fact, I had no idea that they would be embraced so widely. And the majority of buyers are non-Jews.
I was there on your opening night, and I think as interesting as it was to see the different pieces, of course, it was more interesting to see who showed up and how they responded.
Wild, right? It was a wild night.
There was a guy with a parrot. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, and the parrot was a Jew.
How do you know?
I don't know. He was squawking a lot,
There's just a man who brought a parrot to the art exhibit.
Well, it is, there were weirdos everywhere, but in the art community, or
of
whatever
course.
It's referred to, the art planet, the art orbit, the galaxy, the universe, we exist. The weirdos come out because I guess they're allowed to. They're accepted more, which is fine, which is great. But there were also a lot of Hasidic Jews.
Yeah, right, because
that came from Muncie, Williamsburg, Crown Heights.
You had someone helping you on a painting, right, who's an Orthodox Jew, and Finney.
Yeah, Penny. Yeah.
Penny. Yeah. I was interested, throughout your life, it seems to me that you kind of seek spirituality, whether it's from your time on the reservation to the Jewish work that you do now, connecting with your heritage. Is there anything that really resonates with you and what you've learned?
I like that you took notice that I seek spirituality. I do. And I was asked not long ago, what keeps you painting? Clearly, I have bills to pay, and I love my life, and I'm blessed, and somebody up there likes me, and if I can make art, I'm going to make art, because, my God, could not have imagined this back in the day, that I would be doing this. I find my work the spiritual stronghold. I find even sitting in my yard, sketching, say, a bird, it could be a nearby blue jay or a sparrow, because I do birding. I love birds. I study birds, and I study a lot of animal life, but birds in particular, because they're like they're dinosaurs, and they intrigue me. And even filling the blank page with marks that amount to a replication of a bird that I'm seeing in real life. There's something incredibly spiritual about that connection, that I'm sharing that time and space with the bird, that I'm capturing it on paper, that paper will be around forever unless it's lost, But the point being is that my takeaway from seeking spirituality, it's not over. I can answer that on my deathbed.
Okay.
Because I don't know. I just do it because, well, one, the world is chaotic. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of noise. And I seek, without knowing it, I think I seek quiet. And the studio is a very quiet place, even though, I might have music on or podcasts or whatever, or guests and I'm speaking to them or talking. But, in my mind, paintings are very quiet. I don't ever associate noises or sounds with my work. It's weird, but they're quiet. There's these contemplative places. And I think, the takeaway for that is really, if I have to, the reason why I've been seeking it is because I need it. I think I thrive on that quiet place.
2 years ago on my show, I had a rabbi, a very famous rabbi, Manis Friedman, and one of the things I dug up about him that was not well known, because I always like to dig things up about my guests that are not obvious on the surface, he is a healer. So he has people fly in from all over the world. They could have diseases or, emotional turmoil, and he will heal them. And I heard of somebody, he does this out of Minnesota, or he used to, and I'm from Minnesota, so I know a lot of people who know of Manis Friedman. One of the stories that I was able to share with him is someone had told me that their son had some ear infection that wouldn't go away, and he had horrible vertigo because of it. And they went to Rabbi Manis Friedman. He wrote something down on a piece of paper, gave them the piece of paper, said, put it in your pocket, forget about it. And that was it. Then the infection went away at some point. And then after that, the kid was like, well, what was written on the paper, right? Because there's this paper in the pocket that he was supposed to forget about. So, of course, he looked, and it was some random word. They Googled a word. It's a Latin word for the root of some plant. The plant's meant to reduce infection. So the question is, why did he do all of that? And I asked him about that. I was like, why? That's really a bizarre thing to do, right? And he said, the reason I do that is because Judaism believes that
words and things that we kind of emit outward that we put on paper have energy. So if I write a word on a piece of paper and the word is about healing, then I've created that energy on the piece of paper for the person to heal. And I think that's kind of like the philosophy on art, is you're putting this energy onto paper to kind of make sense of the world. Well, it's just another medium. It's not a word, it's a drawing.
Well, that's wonderful to make that connection.
Yeah, it's just funny because it was like 2 years on the dot that I had him, and we talked about this, and now I get to speak with someone who does it in a different way, but the message is kind of the same.
I definitely have no powers. I do believe in the power. It's going to sound, this is probably the most cliche thing I've ever said in my life, but I do believe in the power of love. And I think if love is conveyed through art or through any form of, like a medium, like you say, healing, people take notice. I mean, we are animals. We feel the vibe of other creatures. And just as humans might feel the so-called vibe of another human, and, they have a connection. And I think that's the great thing about art, is that there's this connection. There's this viable means to connect to others without ever really knowing it. But yet, somewhere out there, someone is feeling something from what it is that I've made.
Yeah. So moving us on to a less woo-woo topic, I wanted to understand where the tracksuit came from.
I was watching too many Soprano episodes. This came much earlier, because oddly, I love the Sopranos, and people, so I'm going to admit this, no one knows it. I moved to Montclair, New Jersey, for my kids. And I did not know that Sopranos were filmed out there. But when I moved out there and I was wearing my Puma tracksuit, and, I also have matching pants, and people like, dude, what are you that inspired by the Sopranos? I'm like, come on, man. Like, a few people on that show wore tracksuits, but, it was kind of funny, But prior to that, I remember distinctly looking for a jacket that was lightweight, that I could wear, that I could always have my wallet and my keys on my person, but without being in my pants pockets. I always hated things in my pants pockets. Always. I never understood, like, it just feels, on the tuchus, it feels like an extra lump. It feels like you got a bulge and you don't need in the front. It's just weird, like, and I had a lot of keys. I had keys. I had, a car, I had a studio. So I grew up, playing sports, and, I knew Puma, I know Adidas, the whole nature of the story between the German brothers. Yeah. And Nike, of course. So I tried a Nike coat, an Adidas coat, and a Puma coat. And the Puma coat fit the best. And it still fits the best. And I've been wearing it for 20 years. But I always just liked it. It was black with a white stripe. And I have this affinity for stripes on sleeves. And when I was studying the Lakota war shirts, the same shirts that they wore when they defeated Custer and the 7th Cavalry, war shirts for the Indians, they would bead the sleeves on the outside. And I always was blown away by that design. And I thought, well, they should make, shirts like that. And then I realized, oh my God, they do. It's called a tracksuit or a track jacket. I loved things on the sleeves. There's a motorcycle store in Williamsburg, because we were living in Williamsburg before we moved to Montclair, called Jane's Motorcycles. And it's a great store. They have a little cafe in there, so I used to take my son in there and look at these motorcycles they built, and they would serve, like blueberry muffins and coffee. And they had a black long sleeve shirt with the word Jane Motorcycle down the side of it. And I bought as many as I could of those, just to have them. I don't know where they are now. But I wear it continually, and everybody takes notice. They're like, oh, dude, I never would have known you at, say, at the Armory show or another art fair like Art Basel. The people said, oh, I knew it was you because of the jacket. And I said, really? They said, yeah, look around. Do you think people are wearing Puma tracksuits at an art fair? I mean, no way. They're, And I was like, okay. And then I just, I always wore it, and people kept commenting on it. So now it's become my thing.
It's stuck, yeah. The funny thing is,
stuck.
So if you read Puma, but you read it using the letters in the Russian alphabet, it spells the word Rita, which is my name. So you are wearing my name.
That's that is so cool. I never knew. Only you could say that to me.
Because that's my name in Russian.
Plus, it's a nice logo of the Puma
Yeah.
leaping. I take great pride in that. Like, it's a well-designed logo. I mean, better than Nike and Adidas.
There's someone that you need to meet in Montclair, now that I know that
Okay,
that's where you...
we should talk about this later then.
Okay. Myron
No,
Sugarman, the last living Jewish gangster.
I thought I was a gangster. Wait, for real?
Yeah, he lives there.
Sugarman?
Yeah.
He's like the modern-day Meyer Lansky?
Yeah.
Bugsy Siegel?
Uncle Myron.
For real? Well,
Yeah.
okay, then we should talk about it. Okay.
Tell me, how can people connect with you and keep up with your work?
I would love if anybody has the wherewithal to get through this, my nonsense. They should message me on Instagram. I would like to hear from people. My Instagram, back in the day, I wouldn't have, I never thought it would, it's a good thing. I mean, it's like there's a lot I get to share, from my interests, not just about my art. But, the Broadway shows I attend with my daughter, I talk about the food that I might cook, like I just cooked a bison steak for my son. I always talk about animals and, I find it like a way to entertain, and I would love to know that people are kind of joining me on this crazy trip. So my Instagram is simply Dark Menace, which is, I got to tell you, I can't take credit for it. My students back in college nicknamed me the Dark Menace, and I didn't know why for like a week. I couldn't figure it out.
Because it's the flip
And
of
they
the
flipped
letters.
my initials.
Yeah.
So not Marc Dennis, but Dark Menace. Why? Because I wore dark clothing. I was kind of a brooding human. I had dark hair, dark eyes, and I don't know. I always wear black. And they're like, you're the Dark Menace. And I was like, okay, whatever. I thought they were talking about me being abrasive or just moody. That might be the case. But nonetheless, it occurred to me, I'm like, you guys are all going to get an A for the next project. This is a brilliant nickname. So that's my handle,
Okay.
or whatever it's called.
And your gallery is still in Chelsea, right?
Harper's is in Chelsea. Harper's Gallery, 22nd Street. Yeah, I show with him. And
Anyone in Manhattan can check it out.
Absolutely. In fact, mark your calendars. September 10th, I believe, is the opening of my next solo show with him.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Okay, amazing. And I have one final question.
Say it like a Minnesotan. Oh my gosh. You're not that far from South Dakota, You must know.
I've been to South Dakota, and I've been to a reservation.
Pine Ridge. It's right off Custer State National Park, which is...
I've been to a reservation.
Yeah.
It's like the second you cross, the energy kind of really changes, I think.
So for someone who understands the history, and I'll just leave it at this, it's inspiring. For someone who doesn't know the history and just kind of drifts upon the res, because you can drive through it, it's pretty depressing.
Yeah.
But I'm there, I imagine, the bison still moving across and no borders. And, I romanticize it because why not?
Yeah, because you had that chapter in your life. I have one final question for you. It's one that I ask every guest of the show. Who would you like to nominate for People You Want to Know?
Well, the first person that comes to mind is the person you had mentioned that you had been to the opening of my show, and Adam Cohen, who owns A Hug from the Art World. Very active also in his own way with the Jewish community. Gave me that opportunity to have these paintings presented where I don't think any other gallery would have given me that shot. The show was called Three Jews Walk Into a Bar. I mean, it's all... And he was very happy about it. And I don't know, he'd make a pisser guest. Plus, he has a wicked accent. I don't know where he's from, like somewhere in England. I don't know if he's like, it's like speaking to Aussie.
Oh, sold. Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. This has been
thank you for the invite.
fascinating.
Yeah, okay, thanks for the invite. I loved it. I love doing this. I could talk all day, actually.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please go ahead and rate us 5 stars. Be the first to hear our episodes by subscribing to People You Want to Know wherever you get your podcasts. And for exclusive content, follow us on Instagram at People You Want to Know.